The birthday wish that shattered 30 years of fatherhood wasn't whispered over candles. It came through gritted teeth, before the cake ever left the counter. The best present you could give me is to disappear from my life for good. I didn't drop the cake. I didn't shout. I smiled like it was nothing, like he'd made a dumb joke, and I slipped back inside with the same soft tread I'd used on the nights I checked for monsters under his bed. Then I set the cake down, wiped the sweat from my palms onto a dish towel, and walked straight through my quiet house, as if it already belonged to someone else. An hour later, blue and red washed my yard, the kind of lights that make neighbors part their blinds. Officers stepped through my side gate and surrounded the patio. When they guided my son into the back of a cruiser, wrists cuffed and face blistered with outrage, he craned his neck to find me in the kitchen window like a boy searching for help on the playground. You won't believe what happened next. You probably won't believe what happened before either. I hardly did, and I was there for all of it. I'll start with the truth. I went to ridiculous lengths for that party. I'm a planner by trade, systems engineer for 39 years, and I bring that disease to birthdays. I'd strung Edison bulbs over the fence line myself. I rented a portable sound system, ordered craft beer because Evan liked to pretend he could taste notes of citrus, and hired a taco truck to swing by at 8. I'd even washed the good patio chairs, the ones with the powder-coated frames, so nobody would leave with gray stripes down the backs of their shirts. I told myself I was making up for time lost to overtime and deadlines through his childhood, for Little League games I spent on calls in the bleachers. In the kitchen, a chocolate cake that would have made my grandmother proud waited on the island, sheen of ganache smooth as a mirror. 28 candles lay in orderly rows like soldiers on the counter. The gift under my arm was a vintage watch, stainless steel, faded navy dial, that Evan had admired months ago in a shop downtown. It had been my father's model once, the same line anyway, and I'd convinced myself sentiment lived in the brand. Voices floated through the open slider. Evan's, pitched louder than usual. Cody's and Lance's, the baritone blend of men who never grew out of laughing at the wrong things. There was Tessa, perched at the patio table scrolling with the bored indifference of someone waiting for a faster party. The April evening smelled like cut grass and charcoal. A breeze lifted the corner of the tablecloth and dropped it again. "Dude, your old man doesn't miss," Cody said, clinking his bottle to something solid. "These speakers? This beer? Chef's kiss. He's trying to buy me, man." Evan's voice had that elastic confidence it gets after 2 drinks. Same as always. Thinks money fixes everything. I paused with my palm on the doorframe. The cake tilted like a boat catching a swell. I should have backed away then. I should have walked outside and asked him to say it to my face. But I stayed planted, the way I'm trained to when a machine's humming off tempo. Don't touch anything until you hear the whole noise. "At least he shows up," Lance said. "My dad's a ghost. 6 months, not even a text." "That's the point." Evan laughed, a sound that used to be my favorite. "I want mine to be a ghost. Best gift he could give me? Poof. Gone. Imagine the peace." There are moments a man remembers at midnight, even 30 years later. The click of a nursery lamp, the weight of a sleeping toddler on his chest, the first time a teenager forgets to slam a door. Add to my list the way a cake plate squeaks against skin when your grip tightens, and the way your chest hollows out so fast you have to lean on something or go down. "You could always move out," Tessa called without lifting her eyes. "Radical solution." "With what?" Evan said. "He's got everything locked in some spreadsheet. Cuts me off if I don't salute." "That's not what a spreadsheet is," Lance said, and they all laughed. I stepped back before anyone glanced at the door, the wrapped watch skidding on the mat. I caught it out of reflex. When I straightened, my reflection in the glass looked like a man considering whether to step through or fade. I didn't go out. I set the cake on the counter with hands that weren't taking instructions from me and walked, calmly, politely, through the living room into my office. I closed the door as gently as I'd closed a nursery door, sat down at my desk, and watched my knuckles turn pale against the oak. Here is something that is true whether or not you like it. Love without boundaries is a kind of neglect. For years I had taken Evan's eye-rolling and sharp words the way you take wind in March. Unpleasant, but part of the season. I had explained his moods back to myself until I could make them sound noble. The economy is rough. 20-something men are lost. He's figuring it out. I worked too much. I was too rigid. He needed time, I told myself, and a softer hand. I supplied both. Time turned to years. Softness turned to erasure. I looked around my office at the framed drawings Evan did in elementary school. A dinosaur with lopsided teeth and the word roar penciled in heavy capitals. A crayon airplane labeled Dad Job. Above the credenza hung a photo from his high school graduation, mortarboard tipped low, grin so bright it should have melted the plastic frame. We did it, he'd told me through tears. We did it, I'd answered, and meant it. On the desk lay a manila folder I hadn't opened since January. Evan, expenses, in my block letters. Because a planner does what a planner does, counts. I flipped it open and did the arithmetic again with steady hands and an odd, buzzing calm. Rent, calculated at the market rate, he didn't pay. $2,200. Utilities he happily enjoyed. $340. Food he inhaled and criticized for $100. Insurance on the car we argued about. $156. The 100 little leakages, streaming subscriptions, party supplies, emergency cash. The running total bled red, a wound the color of wine he spilled without apology on Thanksgiving. You don't get points for accurate math at a moment like this. You don't get a medal for naming what you should have named years ago. But small certainties can keep a man from breaking a plate against a wall. The numbers steadied me. They made the vague ache of ungrateful resolve into the crisp outline of unsustainable. I stood, picked up my phone, and made 3 calls. The first to the non-emergency police line, the second to a locksmith, the third to a realtor whose postcard I'd saved not because of the glossy picture of a smiling couple in front of a sold sign, but because of the line underneath. We handled difficult transitions discreetly. By the time I left my office 20 minutes later, the cake had lost its gloss. A little river of chocolate drooped down one side like a tired smile. I washed my hands, thought about lighting the candles anyway, then pictured our conversation moving toward the cliff and stopped myself from setting fire to 30 small wicks. It felt too symbolic. I slid open the door and stepped into the soft air. Evan, I said, my voice level. Can I see you for a minute? He turned with slow dramatics, beer bottle dangling like a prop. He didn't bother lowering his voice. Whatever you heard, it's true. You micromanage. You misread me. You make everything heavier than it is. How can you say that? I asked. After everything I've done for you. Nobody asked you to do any of it. He shrugged. You chose those things. That's on you. The circle applauded with their faces. Tessa watched like a person at a play waiting for the twist. Lance smirked and tipped his bottle toward me in a toast that wasn't. 28 years, I said quietly. I showed up. I paid. I sat in emergency rooms and parking lots and the back bleachers. I taught you to drive in a stick in a parking lot at dawn because you thought automatics were for cowards. I let you stall out 12 times and laughed with you. I thought we were a team. You thought wrong, he said. You're a man who likes control. I'm a man who likes freedom. That's the story. Now please, don't make this weird at my party. I looked around at the faces of people drinking my beer and eating my food on my stones. Something inside me went from liquid to solid. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot. This was a colder thing. A decision like a switch. Party's over, I said. Nobody moved. Lance laughed. Sure thing, Tom. I crossed to the sound system, picked up the microphone, and pulled the volume down with a fingertip. The silence landed so sudden you could hear the neighbor's wind chimes and the fizz of a beer going flat in an open bottle. This is my home, I said into the mic. My voice sounded like it belonged to a stranger I'd hired to deliver bad news to myself. I'm the owner of record. I have asked you to leave. I am asking again. Please gather your things and go. Dude, Cody stage whispered. He really brought out the mic. Evan spread his arms, the way he used to during Halloween when he wanted us to admire the whole costume. Nobody's leaving, he told the crowd. It's my party. Stay? I set the microphone gently on the table. You have 5 minutes to exit before I involve the police. Tessa finally looked up from her phone. He's bluffing, she said to nobody, more to hear how it sounded. I walked inside. You do not negotiate with a person who can only imagine you as a wallet that talks. The dispatcher took my address and my measured description of the situation. Officers will respond, she said, and I thanked her as if she were a hostess seating me at a restaurant. Outside, the party tried to stitch itself back together. Music started again at a lower volume, then cut out when I reached over and flipped the power. The lawn didn't know which mood to carry. the clink of bottles, or the soft thud of my resolve. When the cruiser turned the corner, it flashed across the fresh paint on my mailbox like sunlight on water. Two officers came through the side gate with the efficiency of people used to being stared at by strangers in backyards. Officer Alvarez spoke, his eyes sweeping the scene and landing on the person in the room who looked most like a homeowner. The older guy just inside the door with his jaw set. "You the caller?" "Yes," I said. "Thomas Hale, title holder." I asked them to leave. They didn't. He nodded like a metronome and turned to the crowd. "Evening. I need everyone to listen carefully. This is a private residence. The property owner has requested that all guests leave. At this moment, your continued presence constitutes trespassing." "Officer," Evans said, lines already written in his voice. "That's my father. We live here together. He's having a moment. This is absurd." "Sir," Alvarez said, "do you own the home?" "I live here," Evan repeated, as if that covered everything. Officer Chun consulted the papers I'd handed over inside. Deed, property tax statement, driver's license with the same address I'd had for 29 years. "Property owner's request stands," she said to the group. "Gather your belongings. We'll give you a few minutes." Movement. Quiet, sullen, reluctant, like tide pulling back from rocks. People who weren't part of the inner circle of Evan's entourage tucked phones into pockets, put down paper plates, passed me through air without looking. A few friends mumbled apologies as they passed me in the doorway. Apologies cost nothing and earn nothing, and still I appreciated the small stumble in their voices like a last-minute catch of a falling glass. Lance and Cody didn't move. Neither did Tessa. They clicked themselves closer to Evan like magnets. "This is harassment," Evan said. "You can't arrest me for standing in my own house. We can arrest you for refusing a lawful order to leave a property you do not own when the owner instructs you to go," Officer Chin said. "And for disorderly conduct if you continue to make this difficult." "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and I could see the glint in his eyes that meant he had decided to lose on principle rather than walk away. He had lived his whole life assuming there would always be a net. "Turn around," Alvarez said, voice going quieter, which is how you know you ran through the soft options and reached the steel. "Hands behind your back." Evan laughed, one hard bark. He did not turn. When a hand touched his elbow, the laugh died. He swiveled, and the rest was a lesson you can only teach one way. The click of metal around bone is small and unmistakable. Tessa gasped. Lance stared like a dog discovering thunder. Cody looked at the fence, the sky, anywhere but at the boy in cuffs who had been their invitation to this yard. "Dad," Evans said, his voice coming out of him like he had to drag it up a hill. "Say something. Don't let them." "I did say something," I said. "You didn't listen." He twisted, and for an instant my boy flickered back through the man's face. The 10-year-old whose knee I bandaged after he fell off his bike. The 16-year-old who failed his first road test and cried with his forehead on the steering wheel. The 20-year-old who called me from a dorm room when homesickness felt like the flu. Then the boy was gone, and a stranger glared at me like I was the enemy army sacking his city. "I'll never forgive you," he said. "It landed. I would be lying if I told you it didn't land. But something else landed right behind it. The understanding that forgiveness cannot be the price of sanity." Alvarez guided him to the car with a palm to the back of the head to save him from smacking himself on the frame. The door shut on that furious face, and for a second I saw my own reflection doubled over his in the tinted window, a man who had finally turned a wheel available to him. By 10, the yard was empty. A plastic cup rolled, hit a crack, and stopped. I stood in the cool air with the cake and the candles and a paper bag of unused sparklers. My hand shook for the first time all night. I carried the cake back inside and set it under the fluorescent kitchen light where it looked like evidence. You may think the house would feel swollen with emptiness after that. It didn't. It felt corrected. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I could hear the clock. In the quiet, my plan expanded. It had to be legal. It had to be fast. It had to be final. At dawn, I called my locksmith friend, man named Arturo who had changed locks for me twice after break-ins in the neighborhood, and asked him to meet me in an hour. By 8, he had replaced the deadbolts and rekeyed the backslider. "Family trouble?" he asked without looking up. "Been there." I didn't have to answer. He handed me 3 keys and a receipt I filed like documentation for a machine I never planned to operate again. At 9:15, I walked into Desai and Company. Realty and sat down across from a woman with a silver pen and a posture that said she could force a river to change course with a spreadsheet. Her name was Priya, and she listened the way good engineers do, without interrupting, and for the weak spots in the story that needed reinforcing. You want fast, she said. Fast costs a little money and a lot of coordination. I can do it. Why sell, not evict? Because I don't want to spend another year debating my right to peace, I said. I've bought enough arguments I never needed. I want quiet. Then we price at the exact number that pulls a cash buyer out of bed, she said, and clicked her pen open. We went room by room that afternoon taking pictures. The house looked bigger, empty of people. Sun pooled on the hardwood like honey. Great bones, Priya murmured. Meticulous maintenance. She said it 3 times, and I felt both flattered and ashamed, because the truth is, I maintained this place like a shrine and forgot to maintain myself. By noon the next day, the listing was live. At 2, the first couple came through and walked the kitchen like people who knew how many meals fit in a space. At 5, Priya texted, I have a family. Full price, cash, no contingencies, want to close ASAP. I texted back a number I never thought I'd write. Add $5,000 to your commission if we sign by Tuesday. She responded with a thumbs up and something that looked like a rocket. While she negotiated, I drove to the county jail. Not to visit. To confirm the release date the officers had mentioned in my kitchen. A sergeant named Morales looked Evan up on the computer with fingers that moved like he made piano music on weekends. 2 weeks, he said. Release set for the 29th, 9 a.m. Thank you, I said. He offered visitation hours with professional neutrality. No, I said, but thank you. I went home and packed a suitcase with the efficiency of a man who has traveled for work enough to know you need less than you think. 2 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, 1 sweater, sneakers, shaving kit. I left the suits. I left the heavy boots. I left an envelope on the mantel with the key for Priya and a note for the buyers I hadn't met yet. The Garcias arrived with their kids and a truck that looked like Hope strapped down with bungee cords. Maria wiped her hands on her jeans and shook mine. Carlos admired the irrigation system like he might admire a sculpture. Their son counted steps from the porch to the sidewalk and announced the number with triumph. Their daughter asked if she could chalk on the driveway. Please, I said. Cover it. Make it yours. You sure about this? Priya asked in the foyer with the papers stacked like a tower. Most people get misty. I did all my crying years ago while pretending to be fine, I said. I'd like to try being fine for real. She slid the pages in front of me, and I signed where she put the tabs. When the wire hit my account, my phone buzzed with a number I wasn't used to seeing in the checking balance field. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like room. I walked to my neighbor's place. Mr. Whitaker. Frank. Really? But Mr. Whitaker is the name my tongue uses. Opened the door with his eyebrows already raised like he knew a new chapter when he saw a suitcase. Spare room? He asked, standing aside. For 2 nights. Stay 3, he said. Best gossip seat in town's up in the guest room. You can see your driveway. I'm counting on it, I said, and he laughed without asking what a man like me wanted with a front row seat to his own front yard. We ate sandwiches at his kitchen table. He told me about the HOA argument over mailbox paint. I nodded in the right places and watched the light on the floor. I didn't sleep much. The next morning my phone said 8:37 when I poured coffee. At 9:02 a.m. figure turned the corner onto Sycamore Lane. Evan walked like he always walked, a little too loose in the shoulders, a little too much show for a street where people mow lawns. He had the plastic bag they give you at release swinging from one hand. A belt, a wallet, a phone that would power on and find a different world. He took the steps in 2 strides, didn't bother with the bell, reached for the knob, paused at the first resistance from the new lock, and used the key like a man who believes doors open for him. Nothing happened. He tried the garage. He peered through the front window and saw a couch that wasn't ours and a rug with big flower petals his mother would have hated and laughed about anyway. The Garcia kids' voices carried through the screen. Maria stepped into the frame with a towel over one shoulder, hair clipped up, a woman in the middle of a kitchen day. Can I help you? She asked with kind confusion. I live here, he said. I live here. I am so sorry, she said in that tone you use when reality breaks the news better than you can. The owner sold. We're the Garcias. We closed yesterday. What? He stared at the door like he could will the panels to shift and reveal me. tucked inside like a stagehand with ropes. No, he wouldn't, he couldn't. There's a note, she said, almost relieved to have something to offer. She disappeared and returned with the envelope I had addressed the way I used to address lunch notes for a boy with a blue backpack. To Evan, from Dad. He tore it with 2 hands, read the 40 words I had written and rewritten until they were sharp enough to cut without tearing fabric. Evan, you told me the best gift would be for me to disappear from your life. I'm granting your wish. The house is sold. I'm traveling and will be unreachable for some time. You now have the independence you wanted. T.H. He read it once, twice. He tilted the paper like he thought there might be hidden ink that appeared at a different angle. His mouth did a small thing, like it tried to laugh and found no air. He slid down the wall and sat on the step with his forearms on his knees. I could have gone out then. You'll think I should have, to hug, to explain, to tell him this was the last thing I wanted and the only thing left. But explanation is a kindness only when someone is asking to understand. He had asked for absence. I was finally learning how to grant what he asked rather than delivering what he demanded. He stood, shook his head like a swimmer clearing water, and walked down their driveway, and kept walking. He didn't look up at Mr. Whitaker's windows. He didn't look back at the house. He folded the note and tucked it into his pocket with the care a man gives to something heavier than it looks. By afternoon, I had a text from Priya. Keys transferred. Buyers ecstatic. By dusk, I had a duffel bag in my trunk and a highway open to the coast. I stopped at a rest area where a father was teaching a toddler to count seagulls. 1, 2, 3, fast 1, the child said. I stood there longer than you stand near strangers, breathing the salt and the diesel, and when I got back in the car, I laughed once short, because my chest felt exactly like a paper bag at a child's party, crumpled from too many hands and somehow still holding air. I drove. I stayed in a motel that looked like a postcard left on a radiator. I ate fish tacos out of foil sitting on a curb. I slept with the window cracked and a white noise machine app hissing like rain. In the morning, I walked the strip of beach and watched a surfer fail and fail and fail, and then, because failure is the only way to find it, stand up. You expect the ending to be neat. You expect him to call, contrite. Expect me to fold, elated. Expect a dinner at a coffee shop where he says sorry, and I say I'm sorry too. Life does that sometimes. Not here. Evan called 2 days later to leave a voicemail without hello in it. You're sick. I'll never forget this. Another a week after. I'm staying with Cody for now. Don't think I'm crawling back. Then nothing for a long spell. I bought a used trailer that gleamed like a founding myth and learned how not to jackknife. I found a dog named Rufus at a shelter who chose me by sitting on my foot and refusing to move. I updated documents with a lawyer who took no nonsense and offered none. I set up a scholarship in my late wife's name at the community college where she took night classes when we were young and poor, and for the first time in a long time, writing a check felt like watering a plant and not like bailing out a lake. Months later, a text arrived from a number stored in my phone so long I could find it with my eyes closed. Got a job, it said. Another, later, it's not much. It's mine. A third, I'm going to try a meeting. Like you said, for you know. He didn't say the word. I said it for him in my head and patted Rufus because the truth is sometimes a dog is the only witness a man needs when he admits things out loud in a kitchen with nobody else home. I didn't send money. I sent a photo, my coffee in a travel mug, the trailer window, the morning light like a promise. I typed, proud of you for showing up. 10 words. A better gift than anything I tried to buy in a glass case. When Evan finally asked if we could meet, we picked a diner halfway between where he landed and where I had wandered. He arrived 10 minutes early in a thrift store jacket and a look that said hiding's in sight. He did not order expensive coffee. He stirred 2 sugars into whatever came hot and said, I'm mad. And I get it. That's where I am. He held both truths in his mouth at once like a magician with coins, and for the first time, I knew we might teach each other something neither parent nor child can learn until distance does the instructing. Boundaries, he said, and laughed because he was quoting me and wasn't sure it was allowed. I thought that word was a weapon. You made it a fence with a gate I had to find on my own. I should have built it sooner, I said. Me too, he said, and the waitress put down pancakes like she'd heard enough apologies for one morning and wanted to add grease. I don't mean to dress this as redemption. I didn't change him. He didn't change me. What changed was the math. What I would tolerate added to what he could demand no longer equaled the sum that kept anyone sane. I subtracted myself from the equation he'd written without me, and he had to write a new one with a variable called his own life. A year after the party, I drove past Sycamore Lane on purpose. The Garcia kids had turned the sidewalk into a map of planets. Rufus hung his head out the window like a happy flag. I didn't slow down. I didn't speed up. I was exactly where I should be, which is a line you can say only if you did something everyone told you not to and survived it with your soul intact. I keep the watch. Not because it's vintage or because he wanted it once, but because it was a promise to myself. Time is not a thing you can pour into a bottomless cup and call that kindness. Time is the one gift that must be divided with care. I carved out a piece for myself, finally. That's the part of the story that will upset people who want fathers to be saints or villains. I was neither. I was a man who got tired of paying to stand in a room where he was unwelcome, a man who put his name to a deed for 30 years and reclaimed his signature, a man who learned that disappearing can sometimes be the only way to reappear as someone you recognize. The day the police took my son away in handcuffs was the day I stopped being a ghost in my own house. The day he read my note on a stranger's stoop was the day he met gravity. Between those events, a cake went stale, a party evaporated, a father cleaned his yard at dawn while the grass held the shape of other people's shoes. It wasn't justice. It wasn't revenge. It was a correction. And if you're the parent who needs someone to tell you that loving your child does not require you to become their mattress, soft, springing back, ready for the next landing, consider this the permission slip nobody handed me. You may leave the room. You may keep your key. You may lock a door that leads to your own peace. If they come back and knock with empty hands and a different tone, you can open it. If they don't, you can eat dinner in a kitchen that hums and sleep with the window cracked and walk your dog at dawn without apology. The night of the party, I didn't light those candles. 6 months later, I lit one for myself over a store-bought cupcake in a campground where the wind came in off a lake, and my neighbor played an old song on a guitar badly and sincerely. I closed my eyes and made a wish that was also a promise: never disappear from my own life again.